Yo! Welcome back to One More Meta. My name's Derek, and today I'm so excited to get into another deck tech. And I know stuff's going crazy right now between Throne of Eldraine spoilers and the Brawl Precon spoilers. There's so much going on, but I did need to take a step back this week and do a deck tech on one of my own personal decks. One of my favorite decks that I've been playing a ton lately, and it is Titania, Protector of Argoth. And I know I did a deck tech a few weeks ago on Vile Smasher Thrasios. That had been my favorite deck for years at this point, and this is the first one I've really played that has approached it and how much fun it is, and may have surpassed it. Now, Titania is 3 and 2 green for a 5/3 that has some really unique and cool effects. Now, when it enters the battlefield, you get a land from your graveyard to the battlefield. So already some type of ramp as long as you have ways to get lands in the graveyard, which we'll have plenty of. Then that second effect, whenever a land goes from the battlefield to the graveyard, you get a 5/3 elemental. And that's where it really gets interesting, because this is one of the only token decks where you're focused on just creating giant tokens. Now, there's a few, but most token decks are always focused on flooding the board with as many 1/1s for the most part as you can, and then finding a way to Crater Hoof or something like that. Not saying Crater Hoof isn't still good in this deck, but you don't need to worry about getting 100 1/1s out. We're getting 5/3s. We can get just enough 5/3s to kill people. And it's crazy that having 3 or 4 tokens on the board can create such a threatening board state. As someone who plays a lot of token decks, it's something different, something I had to get used to. So the general game plan with Titania is you want as many extra land per turn effects as possible. Stuff like Exploration, Oracle of Moldiah, Azusa, or a Wayward Swordtooth, stuff like that. You want a bunch of those effects in the deck. And you want a bunch of ways to get your lands into graveyards. And the easiest would be playing different types of fetch lands and stuff like that. We'll get into exactly how this is all going to synergize, but what it ends up leading to are crazy turns where you're sacking a whole bunch of lands and out of nowhere ending up with 30 or 40 power on board and swinging at somebody. And it is awesome. It is, obviously, it's mono green. It has to be stompy in some way, but the way this does it, it's so unique and so explosive. You got to give it a try. So looking at the creatures, obviously I already mentioned the extra land per turn effects like Azusa, Oracle Moldiah, or even a Wayward Swordtooth. I'm not running it in the deck. I felt like there were enough of those effects, but you can kind of find that happy spot that you want to be in for those type of effects. But the next creature that is just as important in my mind is Ramunap Excavator. Now, Ramunap Excavator lets you play lands from your graveyards. It's just another Crucible of Worlds. And when you have all these fetches and all these extra land per turn effects, if you're playing 2-3 lands a turn, it's really hard to, you're not drawing that many cards most of the time per turn. So you just, for that first turn, you might play 2 or 3 lands, but then the next turn, you're not going to have any lands to play. But if you have a bunch of fetches with this Ramunap Excavator, it makes sure you always have those land drops and not missing land drops when you have that many in a turn. It gives you an advantage that a lot of times the opponent won't be able to overcome. Now, the next creature is Lotus Cobra. Lotus Cobra, it's one of those cards that I'd seen it before. I've seen it played. I never really understood how powerful it was until I played it myself. And the first time I played the Lotus Cobra and had a couple fetches out, it blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize how insane the ramp was. And the fact that, I guess in my mind, went the way I saw it, I was like, oh, it just creates a mana that just disappears. It doesn't tap for mana itself. I guess, I don't know why my little brain couldn't comprehend how good it was, but it's insane. It's the type of card that will take a turn from just getting you a little ahead to actually winning the game for you. Now, it's always a big target. People will, destroy it when it gets out there. But if it sticks around, this is the type of card that can just lead to those crazy game-winning turns. Now, probably the MVP of the deck creature-wise is going to be Sylvan Safekeeper. Sylvan Safekeeper is absurd. You can sack a land to give any creature Shroud. Now, that includes itself and obviously Titania. So if you get this out, it's worst case scenario, even if you're not in a state to win the game, you can sack a land just to protect your most important creature. But what it turns into a lot of the time is you gotta hold this up. You play it right before you're about to go off, and then on the end step before that turn, you sack all your lands or most of your lands, create an insane board state of creatures, and basically just say, if you can't stop me, I'll win the game. Now, it's risky, but that's the fun of this deck, is you take those risks and you pull off those type of turns where it's like, okay, I'm gonna go for it all right now. If it doesn't work, I'm probably gonna lose, but I'm gonna go for it all right now. And this is one of those, this is probably the number 1 card, I'd say, in the deck for those explosive type turns because it offers protection in addition. Looking at the enchantments, I already talked about Exploration again. It's the type of effect you want extra land drops. The next two are really the ones that I think lead to the most kind of just string of just chain of events, value type turns, and it's going to be Elemental Bond and Kabu Lair. these are going to read in this deck whenever you sack a land and getting an elemental. Just draw a card also. And that is where it gets crazy. I mentioned we have these extra land drops quite a few times at this point, I guess. And I already talked about too. One of the hard parts is you make those land drops, you run out of lands to play. Now, when you're sacking your lands and getting your elementals, you're drawing more cards. You can draw into more lands, which then you can sack to create elementals to draw more cards and so on and so forth. These create just value engines that get crazy, and they're super powerful cards, and fortunately they're not super expensive unlike some of the other cards. So these, if anything, we want to include the cards like this in this deck because it'll give it a level of consistency, because these cards are just crazy in this deck. Almost along the same lines, Greater Good. Greater Good is awesome. You always want sack outlets, and when you get the value due off of Greater Good, again, most of your creatures that you're going to have out are your commander and those elementals, and they're 5 power creatures. With Greater Good out, you feel fine. If someone decides to board wipe, oh well, you can sack your board and just draw so many cards. And the fact that, yeah, you have to discard 3, but when every creature has 5 power, you're netting cards in that. And you can just cycle through your deck so fast, find exactly what you want. If Greater Good sticks around, you're really in a position to where if they don't board wipe, great. You have a board full of elementals. If they do, fine. Just pick the best cards out of your deck. Essentially, you're tutoring for stuff because you're going to be going through such a big chunk of your deck. Taking a look at the Planeswalkers, we're just running 1, Nissa Battle Force. Nissa is crazy. Nissa's awesome. It's a 5 loyalty that it starts with, and it only needs 6 to ult. That by itself is super interesting to me, and the ult is Landfall, draw a card. I just got over talking about how insane the card draw effects like that repeatable can be in this deck, and this is right along those lines. Now, the pluses are great. It can allow you to untap a land, make it a creature, which we don't care if it dies, because then we just get another elemental, and it returns stuff in the graveyard, which you always want. But that ult and how easy it can be to get to, it's hard not to run this card in this deck because I've hit the ult a couple times, and it's hard to lose at that point. You get so much value from your lands. Now with the artifacts, I already talked about Crucible when I was talking about Ramanov Excavator. Same reason you want this card, because you have all these fetch lands, and to be able to always hit, even if you only have 1 land drop return, to guarantee you're going to hit your land drop with a fetch land every turn with Crucible is such a powerful thing. Usually those early game land drops, if you miss them, you notice. If you miss a land drop turn 5, 6, 7, 8, it's not as noticeable, but it still matters. And with a card that guarantees you're hitting every land drop, that's essentially what it does in the deck. And end of the game, when you have more lands than everybody else, even in the process of sacking some throughout the game, cards like this are the reason. And then artifacts, probably the MVP, probably the number 1 associated card with Titania on EDH rec is Zeranorg. Zeranorg is just absurd. It's 0 to play, 0 to activate the effect. You sack a land and you gain 2 life. Now, it at its worst, it is an emergency situation where you can gain some life to not die. It at its strongest is the same as Sylvan Safekeeper, essentially, where on the end step before your turn, sack a whole bunch of lands, create a whole bunch of elementals, and just go crazy. It's not quite as good as Sylvan Safekeeper because it doesn't give protection, but gaining life, it's not a great effect by itself. But in the context of this deck, it's not bad. If you're going to create 5, 6, 7 elementals, why not gain a whole bunch of life with it? Because you're about to be the target. If you don't kill everybody, you might need that life cushion. All right, now we're going to go to the sorceries. I'd say the 2 most important ones that I'm going to talk about right now. One is Scape Shift. Again, not a surprising card. A lot of these cards aren't going to be mind-blowing out of nowhere. Scape Shift is just perfect, though, because you get to sack all these lands, create all these elementals, and then just get lands back. That's insane. A lot of these land sack effects, we're going to be not netting land. Obviously, the fetch lands are going to get us lands back, but a lot of the land sack effects is just we're losing lands in the process. And sometimes it's worth it when we're getting these big 5/3s, put a card like Scape Shift to get all those 5/3s, and then hand-pick the lands that we want. And when there's some crazy lands in this deck, yeah, this is just a ridiculous effect. So this is going to be something that you definitely want to run in this deck. The other one that is a no-brainer is going to be Splendid Reclamation. Again, we're putting lands in the graveyard. There's a lot of turns where you can have the type of deal where you tap all your lands for mana, sack basically all of them, and then hopefully no one has a counterspell. Cast Splendid Rec, get all the lands back. You end up with a whole bunch of elementals, still have all your lands. Splendid Rec and Scape Shift just create some insane value turns where you can get all the benefits of sacking your lands without any of the drawbacks, which when the benefits are as big as they are in this deck, that's crazy. And in addition to those, we're going to run as many sorcery-based ramp cards that we have, or just sorcery cards to tutor for specific lands. Now, I won't go and list all of them. Some of them are going to pop up right here. But we're going to play as many as we can, and you can look at the deck list, too, to see exactly how many we're running. But anything that's going to grab us any land, not just a basic land, is what we want. Because the non-basics are what really, really make this deck go. And having access to those non-basics really takes this deck to the next level, because if you can pick and choose what non-basics you get at which time, the deck goes from like a cool kind of explosive type deck to a consistent engine that is just taking people down. Taking a look at the instance, kind of continuing just what I was talking about, crop rotation. This is the best land tutor in my opinion you can get. This is instant speed land tutoring onto the battlefield, and you get to sack a land in the process. So this is literally 1 mana, sack a land, make a 5/3, and pick any land in your deck and put it on the battlefield when Titania is out. This is ridiculous. This card is so strong in this deck. It's the type of card that when you have this, you feel so safe. And you'll see why when we get to lands, but being able to pick any land at any moment, there's some games I don't even want to cast it, because I know if anything happens to me, I just feel safe with this card in hand. Speaking of feeling safe, Constant Mist kind of fills that same role where you always feel safe with it. And that buyback of sacking a land, this basically says, okay, you're not going to attack me and do damage, and I'm going to get an elemental on top of it so I can do more damage back to you for trying to attack me. It's an awesome card in a lot of decks, but in this deck, that buyback is a benefit more than it is a cost. And this last instant, I'm going to get back into this a little bit later, because the game-winning step for this deck more than any, I think, is about to be crazy. It's going to be so much fun, because the game-winning steps with this deck are so explosive. But Natural Affinity is a fun card. Now, I'll get into how it helps you win the game directly in a little bit, but for now, this is the ultimate just show of pettiness against someone trying to board wipe when you're trying to go off. Now, it turns all lands into 2/2 creatures. Now, there's turns if people are tapped out, you can just turn all your lands into 2/2s and swing with them. But the reason I love it is because if you get a threatening board state and someone tries to board wipe, you play this. All of a sudden, it reads, all their lands are destroyed, all their creatures are destroyed, and you're left with a whole bunch of 5/3s. Yeah, that's basically the game, even if they decide not to scoop it up and try to play it out. If you got 10 5/3s out and they got nothing on board, it's not going to take long to finish everybody off. Now, this is definitely the type of card where you need to know your play group. People might get mad if they try to board wipe and in return all their lands are destroyed. So definitely know who you're playing with for this card. I know some people are very, very against mass land destruction. In a lot of cases I am, but I feel like this is a tricky, very petty way to go about it. All right, but now we need to get to the lands. Normally the lands is just kind of the passing thing. Oh, we're running this, this, and this. It's all good. The lands are the all-stars of this deck. The lands are what make this deck go. We're running mono green and we're only running 15 forests. Seems crazy, but we're literally running every type of land that can sack itself. Now, I'm obviously not going to read down every one of these because I don't want to make you sit here for an hour. Go check out the deck list. We're going to be running every fetch we can. Any fetches you have, and that's my favorite thing about this deck. When you're putting it together, it can be made on a wide range of budgets, and I'll get into that a little bit later. If you got the fancy ones like a Misty Rainforest and a Verdant Catacombs, put it in. But Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, Myriad Landscape, Blighted Woodland, all those type of things are going to be just as good. If you have 1 or 2 less lands that sack themselves, it's not a big deal. And the thing is, there's very budget options for lands that do destroy themselves that really won't make as much of a difference. You're not worried about color fixing in the deck. You just want a land that's going to kill itself so you can get an elemental. Having said that, there are a few lands I have to talk about that a few of these are very much not on the budget side, but they can take the deck from just a very fun kind of, you can win every once in a while type deck to just a mean, just machine of elementals. And the first one's Command Beacon. I'm so mad that they haven't reprinted this card in any of the commander decks. This should just be in every commander precon in my opinion, but Command Beacon is ridiculous. You sack it and you move your commander from the command zone to your hand. Now with Titania, if you think about it, you can sack this, get Titania back to your hand, cast it for only 5 mana, and then return Command Beacon to the battlefield. This is a land that sacks itself, and also make sure you almost never will have to pay commander tax for Titania. There are some crazy powerful lands in this deck, and this is probably the first one I tutor for every game. Not having to pay commander tax is huge, especially when you have to be sacking lands. You feel much safer sacking your lands if you know you only need that 5 mana to replay Titania every time. Field of the Dead is a newer one that is amazing. Again, we're only running 15 forests. I know it's monocolored, but we have plenty of different lands to get Field of the Dead to trigger, and we're running Scape Shift. This is the type of card where with all the different ramp effects and the sacking effects and all the fetch lands where we have lands entering, you can create some explosive turns where, look, I just got a whole bunch of 5/3s, but in addition, I got a whole bunch of 2/2 zombies on top of it. It's a newer card, something I'm testing out in the deck, but so far it seems awesome in here. Another newer card that I'm putting in here is Lotus Field. Lotus Field is crazy. Now, there's some older versions that are similar to this card that are just not as good, because the problem is you still have to sack the lands and everything, but they don't have hexproof. The fact that Lotus Field has hexproof is awesome, because the fear with a card like this is you play it, it comes in tap, you're sacking your lands, someone can just strip mine you. And the fact that you have so many strip mine-esque effects, they're not going to feel bad for doing it either. And all of a sudden you're out a whole bunch of lands. Yeah, you are in the position where you get elementals off of it most of the time. But you want to choose when your lands die. You don't want other people choosing that for you. And the fact that this hexproof is awesome. This is a card I've got to play a lot with. And in this deck, it is crazy because it's basically play a tap, get 2 elementals, and you're not behind on mana. Last card I'm going to talk about, super unsurprising, it's Gaia's Cradle. This is one of these cards, if you have it, put it in the deck. Obviously, this is the one deck that takes more advantage of it than I think any other deck possible in Commander. If you don't have it, it's fine. Throw in a Growing Rights. But this is the single card that will take this deck from like a 6.5 to a 7, where it can do some stuff, to a solid, I'd say like 8, almost maybe 8.25 on the power scale, where it's pretty consistent and can do some pretty explosive things when Gaia's Cradle's in there. It is crazy. Essentially, it lets you sack all your land. You know, tap your lands, float the mana, sack all of them except Gaia's Cradle. And for all those lands you sack, you've got elementals, so you end up basically doubling your mana. And really, you don't lose any mana, so you can get to the point where you only have Gaia's Cradle out and can still function as a deck, which when one land can make your deck run like that, it is crazy, and it's so hard to deal with because your commander brings lands back. It's, I mean, I'm not breaking any news here. Clearly, it's a strong card, and I know it's really hard to get. But if you haven't been playing for a while and you do have one, no deck showcases the power of this card more than Titania. Now we're about to get in the game-winning step. I do want to preface this with something. I know this deck has a lot of really expensive cards, and I just have talked about Gaia's Cradle and some cards like that. Don't let the budget stop you from giving the deck a try. There are a lot of budget options. I mentioned Growing Rights. You can make it a cheaper version of this deck that will still function and let you have the fun of blowing up your own lands and creating tons of 5/3s. That will still be super fun. This is kind of the more optimized version of the deck. Still super casual and more optimized, but don't let certain cards like that stop you from building the deck. There are plenty of budget options to where you still get the deck to run and still to be a really fun deck. But without further ado, we need to get into the best part and with this deck, the craziest part, and it's the game-winning step. All right, so we're going to start with the first way to win the game in this deck. It's Triumph of the Hordes. We're coming again. This is going to be mentioned in basically every game-winning step. I don't care if the deck's not running green. I'm going to find a way to get Triumph of the Hordes in there because I need my Triumph of the Hordes. It's crazy powerful. I don't need to talk about it much. It's infect and you got 5/3s. It's good. Now, this next part of the game-winning step, I'm going to break down kind of the play pattern that you go through to win the game in this deck, and because it's kind of similar each time, but it is equally ridiculous. Now, the best way to win the game in this deck is with the combination of Finale of Devastation and Craterhoof Behemoth. This is just a ridiculous thing. So essentially, we have a lot of ramp, lots of ramp. It's not hard to get to 12 mana to make that X equal to 10. So if you play Finale of Devastation for X is 12, you get to tutor for your Craterhoof. And what that does is it gives all your creatures plus arbitrarily large amount, trample, and haste because of the Finale of Devastation. If no one counters it, this just wins the game. The fact that you throw in that haste, when I first saw Finale of Devastation, I was like, it doesn't have trample. Why do you want to give him haste? Well, in a deck like this, where you have those turns, I talked about the card draw engines, where you're sacking lands, drawing cards, getting elementals, doing this over and over and over again. You get these cycles. You might create 10 elementals in the turn, but they don't have haste. And I've seen some builds of this deck that like to use Concordant Crossroads, and I found I didn't even need it because basically what you do is you get that Finale of Devastation. It doesn't matter if your Craterhoof's in your deck or your graveyard, you pump that mana into it, and then bam, just smash the table. I mentioned Natural Affinity before. The combinations you can get going between Finale of Devastation, Craterhoof, and the Natural Affinity, it's insane. Again, I was able to get to almost 1,000 points of damage with these cards and all the elementals I had. And I was almost out of nowhere. Like, I had a decent board state, but by no means did I have anything approaching 1,000 points of damage. Everyone would kill me, clearly, if I was just sitting there with the board like that. And along similar lines, Squirrel Wrangler, and the fact that I can talk about Squirrel Wrangler in the game-winning set makes me so happy. Now, the Squirrel Wrangler thing I'm trying to do, it's kind of dependent on the Gaia's Cradle, which it makes it a little bit harder to do, but essentially what you want to do is sack a whole bunch of your lands with Squirrel Wrangler, get a whole bunch of 5/3s, a whole bunch of squirrels, and then your Gaia's Cradle is going to tap for as much as you want, and that's when you put it all into the Finale of Devastation, which goes into the Craterhoof. And the best thing about this is you kill everyone with squirrels. You end up having like 30 squirrels with trample and haste, destroying everyone. So yes, my favorite way to win the game, and possibly one of the better ways to win the game in this deck, is with 30 squirrels chewing at people's faces. All right, so that's going to do it for this week's Deck Tech. I really do hope you guys enjoyed it. This has been some of the most fun I've ever had with the Commander deck. I mentioned it before. Some of these cards are crazy expensive. I know it's a very, very high budget deck, but there are value options. There are going to be budget options that you can go with for the deck. If y'all are interested, I can go over some of them with you. You can comment, let me know, and I can post I won't do a full deck list, but I can post a list of some of the more budget switches you can do to just give it a try. But if you have some of these cards, it's kind of where I was at, is I had combinations of these cards and I didn't have homes for them. And Titania just gave me that home, and oh my gosh, the deck is crazy. So yes, definitely let me know what you guys think. If any of you run Titania, let me know what your experiences are, or suggest some cards. I've been playing the deck for maybe about a month now, relatively new to playing Titania, so I would love suggestions. But so far, it has been crazy fun. Also, these coming weeks are going to be awesome. We have a lot more deck doctors coming, so be looking out for those. Those are going to be crazy. With all the new commanders coming out with Throne of Eldraine, it's going to be awesome. Believe me, I've already started brewing. I've seen some of my favorites. There's stuff coming, and those commanders, I love the lore. I love everything about the set. The trailer was very emotional. I know some had a very emotional experience with the trailer, but it was awesome. It's like a dark, sad version of Shrek. I don't know, but I'm a fan of it. So yes, we got tons of crazy stuff coming. As always, thank you so much to the patrons. Always appreciate and love y'all, and look forward to all the goodies we got coming. We know some of y'all have been asking for gameplay videos. Don't worry, we got that coming. We're trying to figure out the best way to do it. But stuff is coming. But until then, I will see y'all next time.